My dad married Eve when I was a tween. I wasn't at their wedding because my mom died a week and a half before the wedding. I wasn't in a good headspace to go, and honestly, I'd already disliked Eve because she was very pushy about wedding stuff and wanted me to play a particular part in the wedding, to the point where I felt like I was being set up to be stuck with her toddler daughter the entire day. Dad and Eve basically harassed me that whole morning until they left to come. They would not let it go. I ended up staying with my maternal grandma the entire day. My dad and Eve were really not happy with me. Eve said her daughter was sad not to have her new sister beside her that day. My dad and Eve had my twin half-siblings less than a year later. They and my stepsister were told a lot about the wedding and how I missed it and was super sad that I didn't get to be there. They claimed I was sick. I won't lie, it did bother me. In the last few months, my stepsister and half-siblings, now young grammar school age and tween, have asked me why I don't act sad that I missed the wedding. My stepsister said that I don't act like I'm upset that we didn't get to do our sister dance at the wedding, something that she revealed to me and I was never told about by my dad or Eve. She also said I never acted excited when Dad and Eve talked about redoing their wedding with all of us there. I confronted my dad and Eve about the whole sister dance, and they said it was something they had planned to surprise us both with at the wedding, but I ruined it. We got together with Dad's family on Saturday. Eve brought up the wedding and was reminiscing about the almost perfect day and stuff like that. Dad's family was like, yeah, it was such a difficult time for the family though, after I lost my mom and had my life turned upside down. Eve and Dad were like, oh yeah, OP really regrets not being at the wedding, and it's such a shame we couldn't help her make it. My dad's family all looked very confused about the statement. Eve commented that it was such a shame I hadn't gotten the foresight to realize I'd regret missing out back then. That put me over the edge, and I told them I did not regret missing their wedding. Their wedding was not some big important day for me, especially not after I lost my mom. I told them I was in the worst stages of grief still, and I was harassed the whole morning of the wedding by them. I said if I had wanted to go, I would have, and that the lies they kept making up and telling everyone were disgusting because most people who know me know I had just lost my mom and could care less about their wedding. Dad and Eve did not like what I said, but my grandparents, aunts, and uncles all said I was right. But Eve and Dad said I should have a better attitude, and I hurt not only them, but also my stepsister and half-siblings by revealing how little I cared about the creation of our family. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Good heavens. Eve needs to get the heck over herself. It's her fault you weren't at the wedding. They could have had the forethought to postpone in light of the death of your mother. To even think that you'd be all, yay, wedding, 10 days after losing her. To say little of their appalling pressure on you on their wedding day, a week and a half after losing your mother, is ridiculous. You were a tween. You needed support and understanding, and to have your father on your side. Eve is still harping about it years and years and years later? Wow, the woman needs therapy or something. Honestly, a part of me thinks that they should have canceled, even if it ultimately meant having a much smaller wedding down the line. The most critical role OP's father had in the weeks after her mom died was to be there for her and help her through her grief. He was more concerned over OP not attending his wedding, which quite possibly could have been in the same week as her mother's funeral, which honestly to me doesn't say anything good about him as a person or a parent. I wonder if OP's dad and Eve went to the funeral because it sounds like they couldn't give a darn about her or her death, considering when the entire family brought it up that OP lost a parent during the time of their wedding, they reacted like, oh yeah, okay, moving on back to us. They genuinely sounded like they wanted the ex out of the picture as much as possible, even though she was dead, and her being dead just seemed to have worked in their favor in their minds. I'm so sorry, honey. Your father has zero empathy for you. Do what you need to take care of yourself, okay? I, female 44, and my husband 44, have been married for 15 years, and we have 3 children, a young grammar schooler, a tween, and a young teen. We both have good jobs, and we don't have money problems, so this is not about how he spends it. My husband always loved outdoor activities. He spends a lot of time doing his activities, which has always been a contentious topic because he tends to lie to me or his boss. It went as far as him pretending to go for a business trip while I discovered he was going skiing. My birthday was 3 weeks ago. He told me he had some important calls at work. I celebrated along with my kids, but I discovered he was going to the swimming pool instead of being at home with me. I was very mad and very sad. I was trying not to cry while celebrating anyway with my adorable kids. On Monday, he told me he would leave for 3 days to go skiing by himself, starting Thursday. He pretended it was a last-minute decision, but I know he had booked it for a while without telling me. He told me he was super stressed with his job and needed a break. We are going as a family for a skiing trip in 10 days when the kids are off school, so it looks to me like he really wants a break from his family. I gave him an ultimatum. If you go by yourself, this is the end of our marriage. I was so mad he would organize such a trip just after my ruined birthday when he was supposed to be working on changing the dynamics. He canceled. He's very mad at me, not talking to me, and not going to work to show me how stupid it is to have him stay at home. He could work. This is not a mandatory vacation at his workplace. He accuses me of having him stay just for revenge. Am I the idiot for having him cancel an activity that he loves? Edit. On average, he has a lot of time for his activities, probably 20 hours a week. When he discusses them adequately with me, there's no problem with him going on solo trips, but probably not as much as he would like. I don't believe he's a cheater. This is not my problem. Your marital problems are way deeper than a ski trip being canceled. This isn't really about you being an idiot and not about a ski trip. It sounds like you two are on the verge of divorce. I think you need marital counseling or just a straight-up separation. This relationship sounds loveless and unhealthy. Lies, neglect, skipping your birthday, canceling work as revenge. None of this is okay or indicative of a happy marriage. The time for marriage counseling was before this became toxic. This marriage may not be salvageable. Occasionally, solo vacations are fine, especially if they have different views of what constitutes a fun time. Leaving her alone with the kids on her birthday because he just had to go swimming is ridiculous. Also, is he really alone on these trips? Perhaps he's accompanied by a companion. All I can think is, what a selfish idiot. It's all about him. OP, what on earth are you getting from this relationship? It sounds one way. You're clinging to a fantasy of a happy family, but I assure you, your kids feel even more neglected than you do. So do not pretend that this is about the kids. I also tend to think that he's cheating. This kind of crazy selfishness is pretty typical, but that's hardly the point. He's the idiot. You need to reread your letter to see how truly nuts this dynamic is. I, 23 male, lost my dad when I was 8, and my mom remarried Tony a little over a year later, 14 months to be exact. Over the years, Tony and I clashed. He wanted to adopt me, to change my last name to his, and told me repeatedly to call him Dad. I didn't want that, and 2 judges denied the adoption petition after I spoke to one of them. Neither was happy with the outcome, but I was relieved. Tony and my mom have 3 daughters together, my half-sisters. Tony tried to use the birth of the first one to convince me to give his name a chance. He said it would tie us all together. I told him the connection to my dad was more important than being tied to them. He told me I hated my last name, just like my dad had, so he wanted to know why I was so stubborn when I could have a better last name. I told him it was my dad's name and I wanted to keep it. When I was 17 or 18, I realized Mom and Tony were lying to my half-sisters and telling them Tony was my dad, but I was born just before he and Mom got married, so I had a different last name. They even convinced the girls I looked like Tony. I told my mom I knew, and as soon as I graduated high school, I moved out and told her not to expect me to be a part of the family anymore. My mom told me I was overreacting and I should have been kinder to Tony and given him a chance. I told her there was no replacing Dad and they needed to get over that wish because pushing the adoption, the name change, and calling him Dad was only going to look like replacing Dad. My wife and I got married a couple of years ago. We had a very small private wedding because of the global issue. I didn't invite my mom or her family. However, we had more contact over the last few months, and she told me she wanted to be a grandma to our infant son. We've met up 3 times since my son was born. The first time, Mom and Tony both reacted badly to my son's name. He's named after my dad, but not the name people called my dad, the name my dad wished he'd had, and the name he wrote for himself. Tony also made a snarky comment about me taking my wife's name when I wouldn't take his. The last time we saw each other was 2 weeks ago. That time and the time before, my half-sisters asked why I didn't name my baby after their dad, why I named him after someone who died, etc. Last time I told them Tony wasn't my dad, my son was named after my actual dad, and that's why we chose the name we did. They told me I was wrong and said he should have been named after Tony. Mom and Tony both sat there, almost smiling. I sent them both a message afterward, saying if they don't nip the girls' comments in the bud, we won't see each other again, and I don't care if that upsets them or not. They replied that the girls have a right to their questions and comments, and I can't take their grandson away from them. They also said I was behaving childishly. I wish I had never started contact back up with them at all. Am I the idiot? Wow, it's crazy they would still tell the girls lies. Not the idiot, and you're right to create distance. If they don't respect your wishes, then they don't get to have you in their lives. You honestly tried to have a conversation with your mom, stepdad, and half-sisters, and clearly, they didn't grow as individuals. Tony throwing a tantrum because he can't stand that his wife had a son with another man before him and harassing a grieving little boy to take his name is okay? Tony making snarky comments about OP taking his wife's name is okay? They haven't changed. Your wife and child are your family and your priority now. Don't subject them to your relative's toxic behavior. It sounds like your life was a lot less complex and dramatic without them. It must chafe your butt that you'll never have a son to pass on your last name, doesn't it, Tony? Hit your mother's smarmy husband where it hurts, and then tell your mother only she's allowed to be grandma to your kid, and if she doesn't like it, she knows what happens. What I did was wrong. I feel stupid. I kind of snapped, I guess. My husband and I have 2 daughters, tween Haley, my stepdaughter, and infant Hannah. Since I gave birth and up until about 2 weeks ago, I couldn't keep down any food outside of crackers. It would just make me sick, which the doctor said was because of my adjusting to breastfeeding and that it was normal. So up until 2 weeks ago, every single hot meal I made was eaten 100% by Hallie and my husband, though I still made myself a portion just in case. Hallie always ate my portion before leaving the table. She would see it set out on a plate for me that I would try picking at, but as soon as she touched it, I would stop picking at it and she would just take over. I spoke to her about it a few times because I won't eat anything another person has touched. It grosses me out. So she knew. She didn't want to stop because it's not like you're going to eat it anyways. My husband has spoken to her several times and ultimately told me that I wasn't making enough food because Hallie was still starving after eating her plate and second helpings. When I was finally able to keep food down again, I started making more dinner to combat the issue. For example, I made a big sheet pan of lasagna, which should have included leftovers, but my husband had 2 helpings, and the rest went to Hallie because right after I made dinner, the baby was fussy and tired and ultimately needed to be fed. So I excused myself to the other room. When I came back a half hour later, Hallie was forking the last portion out of the pan using her fingers. So she touched it. I wouldn't eat it. Last night, I made 5 medium-sized chicken breasts. My husband had 2, Hallie had 2, and I had 1 on my plate. I was eating it slowly so I wouldn't get sick. Hallie ate her entire plate and then said, "You gonna eat that?" And then she put her finger directly on my chicken. My husband sent her to her room, but ultimately I didn't eat it. She knew what she was doing. Then tonight, I made 5 cheeseburgers for them. I can't eat hamburger, and 2 hot dogs for myself. Again, I ended up having to feed the baby directly after finishing dinner. They had eaten by the time I was finished feeding the baby. I make myself up 2 hot dogs, and Haley reaches over and picks up the hot dog, bun and all, and flips it over, puts it back down and says, "Was just checking if the bread was moldy," and then looks up and sees me glaring at her and says, "Oops, sorry, forgot. Guess you're not going to eat that now, so I can have it if you want." I took my entire dinner, plate and all, chucked it in the trash can, and walked off. She started crying to my husband about not wanting to upset me and that she was just hungry. My husband yelled at me for being childish and wasting food and left with his daughter. He said, "Yeah, I get that it's really annoying and I reprimand her every single time, but you don't have to stoop down to her level. You're more childish than she is." Edit. It's not just with dinner that this happens. Even when I ate nothing but crackers, she still asks me for my food. She eats multiple snacks during the day, including big breakfasts and lunches. She's been to a nutritionist, and she's healthy. She has a high metabolism and just constantly wants food. She never gains a pound, though. She's 5'2", 86 pounds. She's not overweight. She barely gains anything. I talked to her about it, but she said that's just how it works at my mom's house. Mom said that adults shouldn't eat if the kids are still hungry. Not the idiot, but you married one who spawned one. That he allows this is abusive. He doesn't care. As far as she goes, she has issues going on. See if her school has any counseling services. Lady, you married a true-to-heart idiot, though. He's the biggest problem here. This sounds like a manifestation of food insecurity. If there's not enough to eat at mom's, maybe her bio mom is restricting her food intake at their house because she has her own issues. So Haley's having to overeat when she comes to dad's house. You need to tell her that you need to eat as well to be able to feed the baby. If there's not enough food for her, she needs to tell you so you can make her extra or get her something else after. I'd also start keeping a closer eye on her, as she could be developing an eating disorder that isn't showing medically yet. Honestly, it sounds like she's punishing you, or at least pushing your buttons for an unclear reason, but the amount she's eating sounds like a lot. I know preteens can eat a crap load, but this sounds mad, like borderline binging, especially the thing with the lasagna. Also, can I just add that you don't have to clean and cook and kill yourself to do everything you're doing. Everyone should be looking after you right now, and you should just be able to be you and the baby. It honestly sounds like you're pushing yourself way too much to keep up with chores and nonsense when your husband should really be taking some of the load. And if that's so, no wonder you're at the end of your rope.